this is John England from Mind Systems again. As promised, here is part 2 of our one-on-one communication videos from our Power of 4 series. I'll make frequent reference to sales in this video. Why? What has sales got to do with communications? Everything, I would suggest. If I had my way, every person would do a sales training course when they first went into the workforce. We'd probably call it something such as influencing skills so as not to frighten people. But why a sales course? Well, because every time you go to your boss with a good idea or present a new idea to a colleague, you are in actual fact trying to sell them something. For example, what have I been trying to sell you in these videos? What was the very first thing? Yes, that's right, I'm trying to sell myself. Unless I come across as credible, well, the rest is just a waste of time. Then secondly, I'm trying to sell you on the advantages of a simple, usable communications model. Of course, this type of presentation gives me an extra problem because I'm not just talking to one person. This means I have to try and steer some sort of middle path. When you are talking to only one or two people, it's much easier as you can target and meet their communication needs much more precisely. Now let's see in some detail how we can do that. Okay, let's first start off with just a little revision. You'll remember our 4-quadrant model, which was bounded by formal, informal, passive and active. Firstly, you have the shaper, who has a fairly loud voice. They tend to butt into conversations. They're very decisive in their approach. Then there's the resource investigator, who still has a loud voice, butts into conversations, but is far more warm and friendly. The team worker is fairly quiet, but is warm, friendly, asks a lot of questions, very concerned about how you feel. And the monitor evaluator is the factual analytic person who's fairly quiet, asks a lot of questions, very little body language. The shaper under pressure becomes aggressive. Resource investigator becomes emotional. The team worker avoids the issue. And the monitor evaluator appears to do nothing because they don't show how they feel. Now we're going to imagine that we're going to try and sell a laptop to each of these 4 groups in turn. First of all, a few basic rules. We're of course not just selling a product, but we're selling an idea. And to do that, we need to determine for each style what are the things they like, which behaviors make them feel comfortable. What could you do to irritate them? Because obviously we want to avoid that. And what do they enjoy doing? We do that by asking, first and foremost, 2 questions. Are they formal or informal? In other words, are they deadpan or do they show emotion? Are they passive or active? Do they ask questions or make statements or tell you things? If you can answer those 2 questions, you're well on the way to communicating with the people. Now the people, you'll see that I've put 4 photographs at the top. One which I think represents each of the major styles. There's Maggie Thatcher, who's without doubt a shaper, Bill Clinton, who's a resource investigator, the Dalai Lama, without a doubt is a team worker, and Professor Suzuki, the Nobel Chemistry Prize in 2010, which I believe him to be a monitor evaluator. One of the first things to keep in mind is that you do not make assumptions. Never assume you know what the other person wants. Ask them. A fundamental mistake made by new salespeople is to assume they know the product that the customer wants. Well, if they're right, that's fine, but most of the time they're not, and from that point on they have an uphill battle. Pre-arrange meetings. Make sure you do your homework in advance. This is critical. Decide on the person's style and how that will affect your conversation and or the presentation you're going to make. If you're not sure of what their goals and targets are, simply ask them, or ask someone else who might know. Impromptu meetings, well, you've got to think on your feet a little more here, and it becomes even more important that you ask them about their expectations. Don't be afraid to ask for time out. If you find there's critical information needed for the discussion of the decision which you don't have, don't be afraid to ask for time to go away and get it. Okay, selling to a shaper. They like decisiveness, they like making decisions and attaining goals. They hate time wasting and people who don't come to the point. They're very good at making decisions. So how can we harness this? Well, first of all, we speak in a firm, confident manner. If, for example, you're a team worker, this is even more important that you focus on speaking a little stronger and a little more firmly than maybe you do normally. Get to the point. Don't beat around the bush. Offer a couple of viable solutions. If you've done your homework properly, you will have a couple of options in mind. So you might well say, well, I've listened to everything you've said, and it seems to me there's only two viable options. That's machine A or machine B. Which do you prefer? And at that point, shut up. If the options you presented are viable, then there's a high probability that the shaper will make the decision there and then on the spot. The resource investigator likes excitement, fun, and being on the cutting edge. They don't like too much detail, but they're very good at seeing opportunities and possibilities. So you might spend a little time if you walked into a resource investigator's office and you noticed, for example, they had a golf trophy on their desk. You might ask, how did you win that? Just spend a few minutes in social activity. You've got to tell them about the leading edge, the cutting edge features of the laptop. What will it be about this laptop that'll make them feel good? Start in a light-hearted way, be enthusiastic and point out the possibilities of the idea that you're trying to put forward and demonstrate how it will make them look good. Selling to a team worker is very different. You need to establish relationships because they're people-orientated. They hate being pressured and they don't like mechanistic solutions. They're very good at making groups work and people-based activities. So take time to establish a relationship. If you actually know the person, make sure you ask about a partner or perhaps a child. It might seem like wasted time, but I can assure you it pays off. Don't pressure them. If you do, they'll do what they're excellent at, and that is avoiding the issue. Stress the people benefits of the solution or idea. So you could well point out that this particular type of laptop is particularly good at networking, and it'll bring their team closer together. The monitor evaluator likes detail and time to consider. They hate poorly prepared material and people that are over-enthusiastic. They're terrific at analysing situations and information. So you must be calm and factual. Have all the facts and figures at your fingertips. Be prepared to answer detailed questions, and don't expect a decision at that point. They will probably want to take all the information you've given them away with them, so it's what we could call a two-step sale. Now, to sum up, when possible, prepare in advance. Never assume, ask questions as needed, and operate in the other person's comfort zone. Remember, this whole model is about identifying the comfort zone or the communication style of the other person and creating that atmosphere. Well, that's it for this particular video. Watch out for part 3 when we'll look in detail at how you target a presentation so that it has maximum impact. This was a Power of 4 presentation by Mind Systems Critical 4. Please contact us by either Googling Mind Systems or go to critical4.com.au. You could, of course, even phone us. Thank you.